Chapter 22. The Empty Wardrobe. Harry was standing in front of the wardrobe. It was almost empty. His clothes were neatly folded in a corner, and they took such a small place. The wardrobe seemed suddenly huge, despite Ginny always complaining about the smallness of it. In the bedroom, every drawer was open. They were all likewise basically empty. Only his scattered few possessions lingered in there, forlorn. As soon as at home, he dashed there. He only wanted to hold one of her dresses, to try to fill the hole expanding in him. He wanted to assuage himself with the scent of her. He needed it to pretend everything was fine and she was only on holiday and would be back any time. He needed it to ward off the insanity creeping over him. He could keep it in check only immersing himself in a world of lies. But once back, with his craving knowing him from the inside, he had found the house purged by every of Ginny's belonging. How could that be? But he wasn't really able to form any coherent thinking, nor formulate hypotheses. There was only a numbing confusion, so loud it silenced everything. He looked at his few clothes in a corner, and then at the vast emptiness of the wardrobe, always used to be full to the brim. He brushed his palm on the shelf, as if to make sure his eyes weren't playing a trick on him. And suddenly, all that emptiness terrorized him. He was too much a mirror of what there was inside him, and inside that terrorized him as much as the empty wardrobe. He turned to look at the bed, and he knew he could never have slept there anymore. Inside the bathroom, the sink was unusually bare. No bottles, no flacons. Everything had disappeared. He looked in every corner to try to find a trace of her. He frantically emptied every cupboard of the little there was in it. Nothing. He looked in the shower. Not even her shampoo was there anymore. It was like Ginny never existed. The longing for something of her was menacing to devastate him, but he clung to it nevertheless, because no matter how wrecking that could be, how maddening, how searing painful, he was anyway better than the pain it could be triggered by the actual longing of her. He dragged himself back in the bedroom, took the brown bag left on the floor, and went downstairs. He sat on the sofa, still unable to focus, still enveloped in the shock brought by the emptiness. When he looked up, the first thing seen was Ginny smiling. She looked at him through a picture, and she was there, so real, but so fake at the same time. Harry knew he couldn't bear it. The pounding in his head grew and grew, so he stood up, a cold rage taking possession of him, took the picture off the wall, and opening the first drawer in the living room, shoved it inside with such a violence the glass shattered. He took an order where Lily was waiting. She was lost, and one with all his family. Lost. James lost. Albus lost. Sunrise lost. Ginny again and forever lost. All of them, one by one, were shoved in the drawer in a cold frenzy. When he was done, the walls were bare. His hands had deep cuts, and he was panting. All of a sudden he started to shiver. A strong, ever-increasing tremble was quaking his body. He clenched his teeth not to have them chattering, and reached for the sofa, crouching on it, trying to dominate that tremble, trying to keep his mind safe from the edge of insanity he was slipping into. But the shiver wasn't abating, and the insanity was taking over. He felt it ever close. He found out hair was too dense to breathe properly. His chest was going up and down. But it was a show. Nothing was getting in. He reached out for the brown bag on the floor, and ordering his hand to behave, managed to retrieve a vial from it. Uncork it wasn't easy because of the tremble, but the need was so strong he succeeded. He brought it to his lips. They were suddenly icy. He felt cold and shivering. A chilly sweat was glazing his skin. On the other side, the liquid in his mouth, going down his throat, was so pleasantly tepid, so sweet, tasting like oblivion. His body stopped gradually to tremble, his mind gradually calming. The confusion was leaving place to something soft, soothing, pleasantly numbing. A pink cloud was engorging every madness, dispersing all the soaring fears. He was so pleasant, and he was sliding in it, fast, but at the same time, gently. And as the unhealthy sleeping was overcoming him, he found himself whispering to himself, "I'm alone." But he was already forgot, and he was free from everything, with the promise to be so until the next sleeping potion. Chapter 23. False Promise. He knew where to find them, or better, he was sure they would have found him. He started to get ready for a run. He didn't care about running. He didn't care about anything. He just had this loathing and meanness to take out on somebody. It was the same all over, like when Lily died. But this time, he was in control. He was aware of everything was happening around him with the clarity that would have been painful if he wasn't swallowed by the anger. It wasn't the madness taking over. He was sane, perfectly sane, only sitting, frustrated, and looking for somebody to take it out over. As soon as he got to the park, they were there, almost straight away, following him like he was hoping for. The same chattery group following him everywhere. This time, there were 3 girls, silly and young. He had never paid any attention to them in the past when he was happy and satisfied with his life. But now, they could actually be useful to him. Finally, their moment had arrived. He slowed down and, stopping eventually, beckoned them to come closer. He tried to soften his expression. He didn't want to scare them. "Hello, girls. How is it going?" "Fine," they chirped all together, tittering, tossing of hair, chewing of gums, alluring smiles. "We read about your wife. Jeez, we are so sorry, right?" "Liar, you don't give a shit." He ignored it. He wasn't there to talk about Ginny. Quite the opposite. The thought of her would have made him falter in his own purpose, and he couldn't allow himself to falter. Not even for a second. "So," he started to say nonchalantly, "would you like to come to my place?" The giggles grew louder. "I'm serious," he said, smirking. "Do you want to come?" "Okay, all right." they said, looking at each other tittering. Harry knew exactly what he wanted from them. He knew what was going to happen, and he wanted to make sure they knew what they were getting into. He wanted his meaning to be clear, not to have any scene once at his place, because he was going to go through it, no matter what, and he preferred everything to be consensual. If you say yes, I want you to know that it's not to chat that you're coming, and I won't be gentle. I'm not a Prince Charming or something. He was said without smiling. He wanted them to get he wasn't joking. It was unclear whether they got the message, though, as they kept tittering stupidly. But it didn't matter, really. Okay, we can go then, he said, leading them back. Oh my, this place is lit! One of them exclaimed once they were inside. Make yourself at home. I'll get a shower and I'll be back. We'll stay in the living room. He didn't want them in the bedroom, where he had slept until weeks before with Ginny. He would have spoiled everything. He couldn't have done it there. He couldn't wait to vent out all this venom. It tired him enormously to try to keep it restrained. The shower he took was quick, not to allow himself too much time for ponderation, feeling the risk of it. He got back in the living room, wearing only a towel around his hips, his hair still wet. They were sitting on the rug, chatting animatedly, but they stopped abruptly when they saw him. Hermione was right in what had told him years before. He had power over women. The confirmation was in their eyes, in their blushing. They found him attractive. He wasn't going to throw it away. He sat on the sofa in front of them. So, girls, take off your clothes. He was about to discover what they had been waving under his nose for so many years. Not that they ever wore anything very concealing, but now he could finally see what he had only imagined in the past. He had no wish to chat with them first. There wasn't any point in pretending to be interested in them. They had something in common, him and those girls. No care whatsoever in what was behind the body. They started to do what he was asked of them with a naturality and easiness that surprised Harry. He had done well choosing these girls for his purpose. They wouldn't have shied away in front of what he was expecting from them. And they were so young, so fresh, perfect skins, perfect bodies, all different and all perfect in their ways. There had been only Ginny for him before, Hermione too, but he had almost erased the memory of her after it had happened. Therefore, only Ginny. With the opportunity to choose between her and all the other women, he had chosen her. Given the chance, he would have taken the same choice hundreds of times over. But it was impossible. Now, he had only all the other women left. He was aroused immediately by the sight of them. He longed to grasp them and bend them to his pleasure straight away, but waited to savor the moment. He slumped against the sofa as they were coming toward him. He let them undo his towel, let their hands slide on his body, their ravenous mouth covering him. He was heaven and hell. He wanted to enjoy it, and he wanted to ravish them at the same time. His evil self was pounding with insistence to let him take over, and it was so tempting, so easy. He promised him how he would have felt better afterward. He had felt better after having done it to Ginny. He was going to work the same, and Harry believed him because he wanted to believe him true. When their greedy mouth had almost achieved what they were threatening to do from the beginning, He stopped them. Now it was his turn. He stood up. He got the first girl he could size, a curly brunette with a sensual body, a tiny waist, generous hips, and a very beautiful firm breast. He pushed her against the wall, face against it. He let his hands traveling on her back that arched under his touch. He moved them on her waist and on her flat belly. They slid on it like on satin. Blood was rushing fast in all his body and head, pleasantly swiping away everything else. He grasped her turgid breast with one hand, going for the other in between her legs. She was already moaning and panting with yearn. He licked her long neck and felt her shivering. Without waiting for anything else, he forced himself inside her. He wasn't like he had been with Ginny on a similar occasion, when all that spite was pounding to escape, though. There weren't any tears or pleading. She was waiting for it, desiring it. Getting inside her had been even too easy. The sensation, however, priceless. The tightness of such a young girl, the warmth. And he could be brutal. He was allowed to be brutal. He was almost cherished. He could finally let his evil self taking over. He was rough. He had years and years of conjugal felicity and satisfaction turned in anger and spite to reverse in her. He didn't care about a girl. He didn't care if he hurt or gave her pleasure. He ought to get rid of everything that was menacing to corrode him. He pushed into her fiercely, and the girl, instead of shirking, was moaning with pleasure. It aroused him more. He thrusted faster and more vigorously, but there were two other girls waiting behind him, caressing and kissing each other, and he had enough hate to reverse on all of them. He left the first one and took another one. This one was minute, with a perfect fair skin, completely different, but even better for that reason. He pushed her face down on the sofa. He didn't want to see their faces. They had to remain faceless. To allow him to do what he needed to do. The minuteness of the girl and her fragility turned him on. He wanted to force her. He wanted to dominate her completely. He took her thin wrists with both of his hands and blocked them. When he drove himself in air, she gasped. Was it pleasure or pain in this case? His evil self hoped it was pain. Pain could be redeemed only through pain. He reserved her the same treatment of the other, if possible, even more ravenous, even more coarse. And then for the third, he bended on the table, he parted her thighs, he let one hand slit in between, and when his fingers met the moist and the warm in the middle, the urgency, dictated by his impulses, got hold of him, and he took his pleasure with her too. By that time his mind was completely blurred. The two other girls were asking for attention again, and they slid all together on the carpet. He got to do with them exactly and whatever most pleased him. They were eager to comply with any of his wishes, as they always promised him in their letters. And for an indefinite time, he toyed and used those young bodies that were so readily offered to him. When after a while, made of what was in the end simple violence and revenge disguised by sheer sex, he was enjoying again the minute one, his favorite, her delicate body trapped under his own. His spite was heightened, his loath, his anger simmering on the edge of erupting. He grasped her hair and pulled them. The moan escaping her lips triggered the approaching of the final moment, inexorably and overcoming. He thrusted hard into her hair, still a few times to expel the last remaining of his destructive energy, and he was out, just in time. Like every time, and in this occasion particularly. He was amazed on how just a second could bring such change. From the top before to the bottom next. From the turmoil of senses, the warmth, the passion that maddened, finishing with the long tirade of spasmodic pleasure so intense it hurts, to cold, emptiness, solitude, and degrading reality. There wasn't the serenity his evil self had promised. Those girls weren't Ginny. It wasn't the same. They could not give him what he needed. There was only loathing for himself at what he had done. It wasn't even 2 weeks Ginny had died. He had cheated on her in a disgusting way, in the living room where many times they had cuddled each other, they had talked, argued, made love. He had exchanged love for sex. But then as well, if just meaningless sex was reserved to him from now on, he had the right to take it all. Or not. He let himself fall back on the sofa, his body drenched in sweat, exhausted, trying to push away the guilt and the abhorrence with this reasoning. The girls' flushed faces, with satisfied grins, gathered around him, caressing him lazily, playing with his hair, tracing in awe the contour of his scars. He didn't sense their presence anymore, though. He was back in himself. He had no more use for them. They just bothered him.
You were like awesome. Everything I thought you were going to be.
One of them said loudly, after a bit, brushing a perfect manicured hand on his stomach going up to his chest.
We should do it again sometimes, innit?
Yeah, maybe, he replied wearily, just wanting them out of his place. He was about to give them a hint on that direction, when one of them, looking at the clock on the fireplace, exclaimed,
Shit, I gotta go. My curfew is in half an hour.
What curfew? Harry asked, puzzled.
My parents want me to be home for dinner. It's so annoying,
she said, rolling her eyes while wearing back her clothes hastily. Your parents? Harry asked again, trying to understand.
Yeah, you know, they have this thing of having dinner all together.
And Harry suddenly realized with horror how young these girls were. They were still living with their parents. He was about to ask how old they were exactly, but stopped himself on the verge of asking. He was better not to know. Observing them with a freed mind from what was cladding him just a few hours before, he could judge it anyway without inquiring. He felt revolted. They were surely half of his age. There couldn't be more than 1 or 2 years older than James. Their father was expecting them for dinner, a father who probably wasn't that much older than himself. He thought about his Lily, a Lily grown up, an 18-year-old Lily, and what he would have done in knowing she was having that kind of sex with a 38-year-old man. I would have killed the bastard. As he was opening to the awareness of what had just passed, to the madness of it, the curly girl extended to him a paper and a quill.
Would you mind signing me an autograph?
She asked, all eager. An autograph? He asked, quizzical. Dear girl, I just fucked you. What do you want an autograph for?
Yes, please.
Her eyes imploring. All right, he said, scribbling his initial on the piece of paper. This just impressed in him, stronger than ever, how young these girls were, how old he was compared to them, and how sick the whole thing had been. He had to do the same for the 2 others. At least they had something to remember the afternoon by. He had no intention to leave them the real memory of what had passed. He was too dangerous, and he needed them to forget where his place was. He got dressed and accompanied them to the door. His wand was there, at the entrance, where he left it. He waited them to be just out the Fidelius perimeter, and swiftly he pronounced the Confondo's charm on all of them, implanting a different memory. A nice one, where he took them for a coffee in a nice cafe. He had chatted with them and signed them autograph, a fatherly memory of what their meeting should have been. He saw their gaze losing focus. They looked around puzzled, but they couldn't see neither the house nor him any longer. With the autograph still clutched in their hands, they looked at him and cheered, chatting animatedly. Poor girls, used and deceived. As a last-minute thought, to be on the safe side, he pronounced the incantation Ginny taught him a year before to make sure no unwanted pregnancy would follow the encounter, and he closed the door on them, without a further glance. He closed the door on the whole business, trying to placate the sense of guilt, convincing himself that he had to do what he had done. He hadn't any choice. He had to subdue his evil self. He had longed to be alone seconds before, but now that he was, the silence of the house was threatening to awake others powerful and overwhelming feelings. He felt madness pushing to take over, hair getting to dance again. He didn't want to let it happen. He just wanted to forget everything. The girls, the emptiness, James hating him, Sunrise suffering because of him, and Lily. But overall, he wanted to forget about Ginny. He went quickly to the kitchen, took one of the sleeping potions from his store, and once in the living room, he swallowed it in one gulp. The tremor ceased, the madness stopped, the air was breathable again, and a few moments later, he was in a deep, dreamless sleep.